What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. Your boy Clint. This is the total takedown for UFC Orlando. We're going to go back over the card, overs and unders, taking a look at how long we think these fights will last and whether or not we can find value, not necessarily picking a side, but maybe picking an over or an under based on the totals presented to you by none other than Superbook Sports. This is Pub Sports Radio. Make sure you join the pub crew here, smash the like button, become a member, hang out with us for all this free gambling content we give to you every single day. And of course, if you're into regional scene MMA, make sure you check out Spectation Sports. There's actually a card coming up here on Saturday the 3rd, which should be pretty exciting, folks. Let's get into UFC Orlando. Hopefully I've got some of that birthday magic for you. Your boy's 35 today. I'm freaking old. All right, first fight of the night. Estela Nunes taking on Yasmin Jauregui. Total is at 2.5 for this women's MMA battle. The over 2.5 is minus 200. The under 2.5 is plus 175. And I'm extremely tempted to take a look at some violence here in this fight. The way Yasmin Jauregui fought in her UFC debut, both women, it was a slobber knocker. Like, both women got rocked at times, big counter shots. Yasmin hits hard. She's aggressive. She comes forward. Estela Nunes is a high caliber striker. She's training out of ATT. She's young, so we can only expect her to get better. And even though she does seem to have those gas tank issues, that's when she's facing a pressure fighter. That's when she's facing somebody who's going to mix in the grappling and the wrestling and take her down and make her work. If Yasmin Jauregui fights with her the way we've seen Yasmin typically fight, which is counter-striking, this is going to be a kickboxing matchup. And if that's the case, Nunes hits hard. She hits really hard, and she is really slick on the feet. She's fast as well. So I think there is probably upside for both these women to finish and also get finished. We've seen Estela Nunes finished in the 3rd round multiple times in her fights. Again, that's mostly because of not maintaining her gas, which I think comes from the style of fight that she's facing. And if Yasmin brings that type of fight to her, then we could see another finish from Yasmin late in the fight when Nunes gasses out. But if this is going to be a kickboxing matchup, I think both these ladies have a shot to hit the kill switch. So I wish we were getting a bit of a sexier number here, but plus 175. I'll lean under 2.5. Violence to start out the night. Next up, we've got Francis Marshall taking on Marcelo Rojo. Total set at 1.5 for this one. The over 1.5 is minus 175. The under 1.5 is plus 155. Now, I like violence in this fight in general, just because of the way these guys are going to go to war here. But I think at 1.5, it gets tricky. Like, I'm going to have to pick the over 1.5 here. I don't like the minus 175 price tag because of the way these guys fight. But I do think this fight probably drags a little bit late. Marcelo Rojo has been finished a couple times in the UFC, but it's always been late. It's when you put that body of work on him, you grind him down, you tire him out. That's when he finally caves deep in the fight. Francis Marshall, we've seen him be a little sloppy, on the Contender Series. This is a big step up in competition. There's a massive discrepancy in experience between these guys. So is he going to step up and just immediately run through Marcelo Rojo? I mean, maybe, but I doubt it. I do think this is going to be a good back and forth fight, and I do think somebody eventually gets clipped. They both want to take the fight to the ground. They both got submission upside. They both hit hard. They're both defensively void. Like, this should be a barn burner. And I think somebody gets finished, but I don't know that it happens early. It probably happens late when somebody gets tired or gets hurt to the body, makes a mistake. So I will say the over 1.5, but no way in hell am I laying minus 175. Gianno Valdez taking on Nathan Levy. Another 2.5 for us here. The over is plus 170. The under 2.5 is minus 190. Gotta go violence. The way Gianno Valdez takes his fights, it's mostly round 1 finishes. He gets into round 2 sometimes, and it doesn't last much longer than that. This guy just causes a brawl. Now, Nathan Levy likes to have a bit of a slower-paced fight. He does like to mix in the wrestling, take his opponents down, but he's got a bad gas tank. This guy gets tired in every single fight. In his last fight in the 3rd round, he was hanging on for dear life, looking at the clock every 30 seconds, trying to, just chip away and survive deep in that 3rd round. If he has some kind of a gas dump and can't get Valdez out of there, I think he's going to be primed to get finished by Gianno Valdez. But I do think that Valdez, the fight he brings is going to actively give Nathan Levy chances to finish this fight early with that karate style, the explosive striking, and even the submission game. Like, I do think we're going to see violence here. Under 2.5, minus 190, that's going to be the pick. Amanda Ribas taking on Tracy Cortez. Women's MMA total 2.5. Over is minus 300. Under 2.5 is plus 250, and that's more like it. That's what we're used to seeing here. I do think the over 2.5 is probably in play here, just the way Tracy Cortez fights. She's not much of a finisher, at least not from what we've seen. She's going to be the bigger, stronger girl in this matchup, and that's where I think this really benefits her with the wrestling. She's going to look to take down Amanda Ribas and sit on top of her and grind this fight out. Now, Ribas has looked a little chinny on the feet before. We've seen her hurt, wobbled, rocked, knocked out. So I do think there's a chance that Tracy can maybe get a ground and pound finish. Amanda Ribas obviously has that high-level jiu-jitsu pedigree, so she could always catch Tracy Cortez with something, but I don't necessarily see that happening. Cortez's submission defense has looked pretty solid, and she's hanging out with Bryan Ortega, so I think she'll be on point to be able to defend whatever Ribas is throwing up from her back. I don't think this one finishes. I think we see a full 15 minutes. I'll say over 2.5. JSP taking on Darren the Damage Elkins, another 2.5 for us here. The over is plus 115. The under 2.5 is minus 135. And I would have to agree more than likely with that under 2.5 here in this spot, just because it's Darren Elkins. Like, what else do you expect to see from this guy? So this is going to be a one-round barn burner. JSP comes out and pushes the pace on people, breaks them in, and then round 2, they've got nothing left to give, and he wrecks them at that point. Darren Elkins, though, has made a career of doing the exact opposite, coming out and getting wrecked in round 1, surviving, digging deep, and then coming back into the fight later on. This is just kind of a passing of the torch of gas tanks, I feel like. JSP should win this fight, but we have seen him slow down. We have seen him get out scrambled. We have seen him get tired before. And if that happens, frankly, I don't know a man alive who can take the beating that Darren Elkins puts on you in the second and the third round once he's in the driver's seat. So either way, I do think this fight probably finishes. I think Darren Elkins is on his last legs. The durability is obviously slipping, so JSP should be able to get him out of there. But if JSP doesn't get him out of there and he does take his usual approach, Elkins probably takes over deeper in the fight and gets it done himself. I'll say under 2.5, minus 135. Mark Diakiese taking on Michael Johnson. A total set at 2.5. The over is minus 210. The under is plus 185. And it's another one where I'm actually kind of tempted on the under. So I know Mark Diakiese's been doing this wrestling thing lately, right? Like, he's the new GSP out. He started off as a big-time Muay Thai striker, figured out he can win fights much easier, just bringing his physicality to bear and putting people on their asses. And that's always been the problem for Michael Johnson, is he gets tired, gives up those takedowns, and is willing to just ride the fight out on the floor once you start getting him there. But he takes his best crack at it early. He really gets in there and goes to war early on in the fights and tries to knock his opponents out. We know all the way back to that Dustin Poirier knockout, this guy's got pop in his punches. Mark Diakiese's been historically very durable in his career, though, so I kind of expect him to be able to survive that, get this thing to the ground, and then once it's there, Diakiese got called out by Bisping last time for basically being boring and not pushing the finish and not trying to get his opponents out of there when he's in a full driver's seat looking like a minus 1,000 favorite. So in this spot, I kind of think Mark Diakiese probably takes a couple chances. And because of that, we've seen Michael Johnson tapped 9 times. 9 times. So even if Diakiese wants to just keep this thing on the mat and go that way, I do think he eventually finds either a ground and pound TKO or sub over Michael Johnson in the second or the third round. But Michael Johnson is always live in that first round, or just nuke Diakiese and call it a day. So I do think some under 2.5 at plus 185 doesn't sound half bad to me, with both these guys bringing finishability to the table. Scott Hot Sauce Holtzman taking on Clay Guida, another 2.5. Over is minus 200. The under 2.5 plus 175. And you can't argue with this one. I mean, it's got to be over 2.5. The only way I can come up with really anything for this fight to get finished is that Hot Sauce may be just dust at this point. Like, his chin absolutely could be shattered, and if that's the case, maybe Clay Guida finds a big overhand right and TKOs him or something like that. Clay Guida has been submitted on the ground, but Hot Sauce isn't really the type of guy that goes for chokes, so I see this one really being kind of a 15-minute slugfest between these two guys, or more of a grind fest, I guess, since they're both primarily grapplers usually. So we could get that, low volume kickboxing, that bad striking matchup between two wrestlers for 15 minutes, or we will get a wrestling match between these guys. I expect it to go the full 15. Emily Ducote taking on Angela Overkill Hill. Another 2.5 for us. Over is minus 380. The under 2.5 is plus 320. And frankly, the only way this fight finishes, I think, is from Emily Ducote. And Angela Hill is another one of these stupid durable fighters. I mean, nobody takes that front kick from Amanda Lemos. Absolutely nobody. Hill ate it like a champ, came back and arguably won that fight. So as much as I think Emily Ducote is going to give us opportunities for unders and inside the distance props against other women in her future because she brings some serious power apparently with her to the table, and those leg kicks are nasty. She can chop her opponent's calves out from under them. I don't think Angela Hill's the one that's going to work on. Angie Hill is a decision machine. You're not going to get her out of there, and she never finishes anybody. So in an Angie Hill fight, it's over 2.5 always, every time, twice on Sunday. Phil Rowe taking on Niko, the hybrid price. Another 2.5 here for us. Over 2.5 is plus 150. The under 2.5 is minus 170. And again, I got to agree with the violence on this one. Phil Rowe, he's got the cheat code physique, right? He's one of these guys that just comes out. He's super tall, super lanky. He's strong. BJJ black belt, training with some of the best in the world. And Niko Price coming off a long layoff. We've seen his durability get chipped away at a guy who normally, used to be just one of these marauding, death punching, able to take the kitchen sink type of fighters. He's been knocked out a couple of times. So taking on somebody like Phil Rowe, I do think the finishing upside is there for Phil, and Niko has been finished, can be finished. And Niko Price does still have that death punch. Like, I don't know if maybe the power is slipping from him. I don't know if maybe he's using, higher fight IQ and he's just not swinging the way that he used to, and that's why he's not finishing guys these days. Or maybe he is just straight up faded. But I got to believe that death punch power is still in there somewhere. We've seen Phil Rowe rocked and wobbled by much lesser competition in his first couple of UFC fights. If Niko connects clean, I think he can end the fight. So I do think the under 2.5, somebody eventually is going to go to sleep here in this one. I've got like a weird outside shot at like Niko Price, maybe just grinding Phil Rowe for 15 minutes straight and laying on top of him and never letting him get up. But I don't think he can keep that up for 15 minutes. Like, it's possible. The game plan is there. I just can't trust Niko to actually follow through with it. So I think eventually Rowe will get up, and when he gets up, they will start throwing. So I think somebody eventually is going to get knocked out in that spot. Kyle Daukaus taking on Eryk, ya boy Anders. Another 2.5. The over is minus 170. The under is plus 150. And I actually like violence in this one too. Under 2.5 plus 150. So Kyle Daukaus has just the nastiest front choke routine. Like, he can darce people. He can guillotine people. His jiu-jitsu is slick, and he's big for this weight class. He's got these long-ass lanky arms. Now, Eryk Anders has been working diligently on his grappling, but recently we've seen him getting tapped a lot. Like, even in the grappling, the flow grappling fights that he's been doing, and in his UFC fights, he got armbarred not too long ago by Muniz. Like, he's kind of slipping when it comes to that stuff. Now, Eryk Anders also likes to maraud forward and swing big hammers and try and knock people out. He doesn't have the kind of, power punching that they really hype him up to have, but he is a big, explosive, and strong dude. And Kyle Daukaus, frankly, I think Kyle Daukaus is chinny. Both of the Daukaus brothers, I think, have suspect durability. We've seen Daukaus hurt, wobbled, rocked, knocked out cleanly, very recently, in fact. So I do think there is a question of being able to get chinned by somebody like Eryk Anders. The only way this thing doesn't finish, I think, is if Eryk Anders manages to pin Kyle Daukaus up against the cage and hold him there for a straight 15 minutes. Now, that's usually Anders' game plan, so it's on the table. It can happen. But I also think at some point during that type of a game plan, Kyle Daukaus will find his way to a choke. Eryk Anders sticks his neck out there way too often for my liking, and whenever that happens, this fight will end up on the ground. Whether it's Anders being on top, getting swept, and ending up on bottom, or anything along those lines, the ground and pound finish from Eryk will be there. The arm bars, the chokes, the reverses, the back take, it'll be there for Daukaus. I think one of these guys gets finished on Saturday. I like under 2.5 at plus 150. Roman Dolidze taking on Jack the Joker Hermansson. Total set at 2.5 for this one. The over 2.5 is minus 140. The under 2.5 is plus 120. And I actually like over here. That may cause some confusion for people because Jack Hermansson, he's been wobbled and hurt before by people that maybe shouldn't be hurting you. And Roman Dolidze obviously is a big-time power puncher. We've seen that on display his last couple fights. Both guys have that submission grappling upside, but I actually think that cancels out. I think both guys are such slick grapplers that the other one will not be able to catch them in anything. And so we're going to end up seeing a very measured pace from Jack Hermansson. We just saw what he was able to do against another power striker in my guy Chris the Action Man Curtis, being able to just kind of stick and move and stay away from the power of his opponent, really frustrate the guy that's coming forward trying to land heavies. And I think that'll work on Roman Dolidze. Dolidze is a big guy at this weight class. He used to fight at 205, but he doesn't really have the athleticism or the speed that I think it will take to catch Jack Hermansson. Now, if he does get him cornered at any point in this fight, it very well could be over. So you'll be like white-knuckling, gritting your teeth on this one, looking for an over. But I think Jack is probably going to be able to mix in the grappling, use his footwork, use that long, lanky jab, and survive this thing until late. I kind of like the over 2.5 at -140. And Jack the Joker by decision is actually my prediction for the fight. Sergei Pavlovich taking on Tuivasa. Total 1.5. Oh, baby. Over 1.5 is +170. The under 1.5 -190. I don't know how you look anywhere but under here. I would love to make a case for the over 1.5. You guys know me. I like to go against the grain, try to come up with some opportunities to find that plus money and find a spot that maybe nobody's looking at to sink a 8-ball corner pocket and cash a ticket, but this ain't it. Sergei Pavlovich, win or lose, doesn't get out of the first round. The one time he faced any adversity whatsoever, he completely folded against Alistair over him. And I think Ty is the kind of guy that can make him face adversity. Even if this thing does get extended past the first round, Ty is just an absolute monster in the second round. And I think Sergei will be the one fading if this thing gets to the second. So you want me to argue 2 minutes and 30 seconds here of the second round if we think it maybe gets out of the first? Like, the way these guys bang, you got to think it's probably going to happen quickly. I think there will be some respect. I think it'll start a little bit slow, so not like a, under half round type of situation. I think it'll be the later half of round one where they really start to kind of feel each other out and get going, especially if Ty goes to the leg kicks. It's going to be a situation where he forces Sergei into a brawl much, much quicker than you would expect him to. So I kind of hope Ty takes his time, kicks the legs out from under him a little bit, and then at the end of the first round, we probably get that, slugfest we're used to seeing where one guy ends up dropping. I'll say under 1.5, but I don't really like that -190 for that either. Matt Schnell taking on Matheus Nicolau. Total set at 2.5. The over 2.5 is -115. The under is -105. So dang near pick 'em here at 2.5 for this one. And I don't know what to do with this one. So Schnell has made it a full 15 minutes before, surprisingly at times. He fights with a style that lends itself to the under 2.5, but even when he gets hurt and rocked and wobbled, sometimes he manages to pull through that and survive. And he also has the ability to just stick and move and use that long jab and keep his opponents frustrated for a full 15 minutes. I can see him pulling that kind of a game plan here against Nicolau. However, Nicolau, he's so explosive. He looks for big counter shots. He's got the wrestling upside. I think the jiu-jitsu probably cancels each other out here in this spot. And the way Matt Schnell got chinned not too long ago, you can't think he's fully recovered. I don't want to bank on his durability in this spot. I think a big shot from Nicolau can get it done and put him down. I don't like this total, frankly, guys, because I can see both guys having that finishing opportunity in this type of fight. It all comes down to game plan. If Matt Schnell wants to take it 15 minutes, Nicolau will engage in that low volume, rely on my power striking type of decision where he's just going to land cleaner and harder than his opponent and get him all 15 minutes for a decision victory. He'll happily engage in that kind of a fight. So I don't like it. I think I'm going to say the over 2.5 at -115 is probably my prediction here, but zero confidence. Either one of these guys could catch the other one at any point in time, and especially with Schnell's chin. I don't like betting an over on Schnell's chin. Rafael dos Anjos taking on Bryan Barberena. Another 2.5 total here. The over is -180. The under is +160. And it makes sense because Rafael dos Anjos is a grappling machine. And moving back up to 170 against Bryan Barberena, a guy who historically just cannot stop the takedown. Makes sense for Rafael dos Anjos to grind and get an over 2.5, take it, 15 minutes and win an easy decision. Barberena's been working on his get-up game. That's something that he does a lot, tires his opponents out, and even when he gets taken down 5-6 times in a fight, he still can put up over 100 significant strikes. So this fight could, at some point, absolutely get hairy. There's a big class difference. Rafael dos Anjos has fought only champions and, championship contenders and stuff like that. He's completely given up on his title aspirations, though. He come out recently and he's talking about how he's done with 155. He's done with hunting a belt. He's not going to be sad if he never gets to fight Islam. Like, he seems to have finally accepted that he's at the twilight of his career. And that always worries me. That mental state change, coming off a knockout loss, moving up a weight class, this all comes around like he's fighting for a paycheck, and if that's the case, someone like Bryan Barberena, who's out there fighting for shits and giggles, is going to put you in a war that maybe you're not ready for. I don't want to second guess Rafael dos Anjos. He's one of the greatest of all time, ever. Very underrated. One of these guys that could have been a long reigning champion and circumstances kept him from it. So I don't want to speak ill of Rafael dos Anjos at all. He's been a money machine for me at times when he's been able to just kind of outwork and outgrind people. This is a spot I'm a little worried about him for. So that over 2.5 is going to be my pick. I do think it probably goes 15 minutes, but I'd be a little worried about either RDA catching a sub at some point if he's just able to completely dominate Bryan Barberena, but also being the smaller guy and coming off a knockout loss, I would be worried about Barb catching him with an elbow on the way in or something like that and maybe putting him down and having a knockout take place that not a lot of people see coming. So not one I'm interested in betting whatsoever. I'll be very curiously watching though. Kevin Holland taking on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Another 4.5 for our main event. Over 4.5 is plus 150. The under 4.5 minus 170. And I've been looking at the over 4.5 all week. It's very, very tempting to me because that's the way Wonderboy fights. Now, the problem with that is Kevin Holland has super size and reach advantages here in this spot. He's much younger, he's much taller, he's much longer. And because of that, I think he's going to find a way to touch Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in ways that nobody really has been able to before. And even though Thompson does have some decent sting on his punches, he's mostly just been a decision guy since he gets those, flashy early karate knockouts. They just kind of don't happen anymore. The guy's 40 years old. I don't expect that to, recreate itself. It comes down to Kevin Holland. The guy plays with his food. So I don't think this fight is going to be over in a hurry or early. These guys like each other. He's going to want to get in there and play and dance and have a good time with it and should be plenty entertaining. But if Kevin Holland KOs Wonderboy at some point in this fight simply because he's younger, bigger, stronger, longer, and hits harder, that's not going to shock me. But I also could see this being just that friendly type of kickboxing match where they're basically out there taking a paycheck sparring and squeezing over the 4.5. I would lean with the over 4.5 at plus 150 in this spot. If you're not taking the over on this one, you're pretty much picking Kevin Holland. I would say take Kevin Holland by knockout if you or inside the distance because he does have that, club and sub upside. But if you think that it's going to go under, it's more than likely Kevin than it is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, in my opinion. So I'm going to say over 4.5 for the sake of the show. Maybe hedge that out on Kevin inside the distance, but it's a tough main event, to be honest. It really is because you never know what Kevin Holland is going to do until he's actually standing in the cage. That's UFC Orlando Total Takedown, folks. Thank you so much for rocking with me here today. Smash the like button for me on the way out if you would, and give me a 5-star review if you're listening to this on the audio version. I appreciate all of you. We'll see you tomorrow for the undefeated post-weigh-in show. Let's roll. Good luck on all your bets.